cost over 30 years. That's the maximum period that GASB allows to be compliant with this accounting standard. Okay, 30-year amortization. All right. If we go over to the right chart, the only difference is this chart is 10-year amortization. So you can, and basically that's, you know, this is a mortgage. Do I want to pay my mortgage over a 10-year period or a 30-year period? And so if you pay it over a 10-year period, those costs are higher. And so that's what we're seeing in the right chart. And you see that even if we pre-fund, and I'm picking the middle column, the annual cost goes from roughly $6.6 million, that's a total in the middle column on the left, up to $12.6 million. So pretty significant. Okay, so why am I showing you these two periods? Because the most common thing is, the most common result we would look at for a public agency is they'll say, give me the lowest number. Well, what is it? Can we spread this over 30 years? And that's it, 30 years. The difference is, while the county has been responsible in managing this benefit, whereby only active employees hired before 1998 are eligible, right? And that really limits the liability. It does to a significant portion. We don't show it here, but it had a tremendous impact on limiting the liability. When we look at what period do we pay this off over, those employees who are eligible for this benefit, most of them won't be active beyond the 10-year or 15-year period. So this really points to what is the appropriate period for recognizing these costs over or in the financial statements. So up above in the second bullet, the first sub-bullet, amortization period, future active service on average is roughly 9 years. Okay, so we're showing 10 years here just because it's a nice even amount. So GASB really allows you to amortize over the 30-year period still, okay? But I wanted to make sure that you understand what the costs are over that 10-year period. Okay, so that's the purpose of the small graphs here and why I showed two. Any questions on that? Because these are, no, so I'll just remind you, these are annual costs. This is the cost each year. And I guess one way to think of these costs, the reason I separated them into the amortization amount, amortization of the accrued liability, and then separately the normal cost is, at the end of that amortization period, the blue part goes away. And then you're just left with that remaining piece for a few years. Yes?
Brad, we do have a question. Supervisor Smith.
Thank you. Brad, in terms of, I want to see that I am getting this correctly, this amortization period, it says future active service is 9 years. So we have a finite number of those that are still employed that, under the resolution of the Board of Supervisors, I think from 1998, made that delineation of who was, quote, eligible and who was not. So you're working with a finite number of those that are receiving benefits and that are entitled to benefits, right? So is this not, so you've come up with 9 years. Is that the average that you've come up with of that pool of employees that are still employed that would be the pre-98 or September of 98 hires that might be eligible? So you've fixed it at 9 years and then you've done your table? Is that an accurate way of?
Really very close. We've looked at that group hired before 98, and remember I said we consider how long people are going to work, when they're going to. Some will leave just because they leave employment before they retire, and others will actually make it to retirement. And so we look at those probabilities, those likelihoods, and the result, when we look at how much longer on average will people work, those that are going to retire, how much longer on average will they work before they retire, right, the result is 9 years. Okay. So for some of them it might be 20.
Right.
Some of them it might be, it's 1 or,
right,
or close to 0, but 9 is the average.
Okay.
Thank you. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay. So I'll assume you understand and you're not bored by listening to an actuary.
Not
Okay.
to this point, Brad.
Huh?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, that inevitably that time comes.
Okay.
I usually start with that. This is not the most. I thought I had a bigger crowd here, but I guess they were here to see Steve, and not me. This next chart is we did just kind of a real rough projection on what this looks like going out. So you can see the difference. The main reason we show this here is to understand that net OPEB obligation. And remember, that's what shows up on the balance sheet, and it's the accumulated difference between the annual cost and the actual contributions. And so what we're showing here is the two scenarios, the two discount rate scenarios, or the two funding scenarios, either fully funding or pay-as-you-go. Okay, and I should mention here, you can do anything in between. I mean, there's nobody says you have to do one or the other, but I'm giving the two extremes here. Remember, if we're on pay-as-you-go, we have those annual costs, the $7.3 million, and that should be the numbers that we showed earlier. And you see that slightly growing each year. There's an expectation that these costs